Good evening, Sir Dennis.
Good evening, Paul. Good to speak to you again.
Absolutely, and welcome all to our Legends of the 70s podcast. Then we've done 5 before. We've done 2 Morty's mixtapes, so we're going to be talking about vinyl a little bit later on the podcast. Champions of Europe Part 1 and Part 2, when you conquered Europe in 1982, and the class of 81. This is the 6 in our double trilogy, and we're going to take a trip down memory lane and possibly just drop off at a pub and have a drink or two. But before we do that, I do want to talk about your book, The Full Morty, a fantastic read. Thank you for sending it, sir. Sorry I couldn't attend that evening, but the wife hadn't been very well, and I just couldn't make it. So let's start with the book. You must be very proud, and Richard Sydenham, let's give his surname as well,
Yes.
has done a fantastic job there.
Yeah, it was a book I wanted to bring out, Paul. For quite a long time, but I just kept putting it off. I just thought there was more to say, and then I got to this ripe old age of 70, and I just thought, well, we've had the celebration of the 40 years of winning the European Cup and the league. And I just thought it'd be nice to actually sort of finish it all off with my own story. And not just a story about winning the league and the European Cup, but the stories before that, and really that's how it came about. And it was interesting, the title was an interesting start because when we first started it with Richard, he thought, well, have you got an idea for a title? And I had 2 titles, but I don't think you could have 2 titles on a book. But I'll tell you what the 2 titles were. The first, because it wasn't a book about, both when I started at Coventry and then obviously with the Villa. I sort of had 2 titles. One was called Sent to Coventry, which actually is a title of one of the chapters. I just thought it fitted, because, as I say in the book, where's Coventry? Gosh, I didn't know where that was. And then the other one was obviously Ron Saunders' mantra, in his program notes about going out and playing. He said, just give me 110%, and basically they were my titles, but, Richard just thought they were a bit too long-winded. He came up with one which I didn't like at all, yeah, and I thought, no, we're not going with that, Richard. We're going to have to find another one. So I just happened to be talking to Andy Blair one day, and I was just saying to Andy, we were having a chat, and I just mentioned to him about writing a book and stuff like that, and I said, listen, I'm not happy with the title I've got at the moment. I need a new one. And just off the top of his head, he just went, why don't you call it The Full Morty? And I thought, that's a light bulb moment, isn't it?
That's Andy Blair, though, isn't it?
Andy Blair, yeah.
That is Andy Blair in a nutshell.
And he came up with that, and I thought, crikey, that's good. So the next thing now is to try to persuade the publishers and also Richard, that was the title I wanted. It didn't take much persuading because I just said, look, that's the title for my book. No questions about it. Get that one down. Yeah, and that was it. And that's how we got the name. So I just thought it just fitted the bill, really, Paul. Yeah, The Full Morty. Yeah.
And I think it's a great play on The Full Monty and The Full Morty.
Yeah.
And it's when you look at it, you actually you look at the title, you go, The Full Morty. I actually want to read this book because it suggests that it might be a little bit comical as well. There's another book that's out now. It's called Cockaroop. It's about Les Cocker. And I just think they're very, very clever titles. And I think that having a title that is clever and one that works is fantastic. Andy Blair really is. He's as sharp as a tack, isn't he? He's always on his toes. He does the after dinner circuit, and he's done many events, hosted many events for you guys at the Britannia Bar in Wollaston that I've attended quite a
Yes,
few
yes.
myself, and he is very clever, very sharp, and really followed in the footsteps of Dennis Mortimer, because your career started at Coventry. He followed you pretty much into Coventry, and then he come to the Villa, and sadly you'd won the European Cup, and there was still
Yes.
a lot of miles left in Dennis Mortimer, but very similar
Yes.
players, weren't you? You and Andy, you got a great, camaraderie as well now. After you
Yeah.
finish your careers.
Yeah, no, I mean, we always kept in touch,
Yeah.
obviously, as you well know, about the European Cup
Mm,
side, because then the League Championship, well, the European Cup, because Andy wasn't there for the league. But
yeah.
we've stayed pretty close because we live in the area,
Yes.
so it was always good. But as you say, Andy, when he finished playing, he took up this second sort of stream of working, which was hosting, sort of Q&As and
Yeah.
everything, and. He had a real master who he learned from. It was a comedian who we used to go, and I've seen him a few times. I can't remember his name now, but I think he got all his punchlines and his timing from that comedian, and that's what you need sometimes. When you want to be something like that, it's either you've already got it or you learn it from someone else. But when you learn from a master. And this comedian was really good, at sort of doing that kind of stuff. I think Andy learned an awful lot from him, and that's why he's so impressive now, and he does a good job. He really does.
Absolutely, and I think you're right, learning from the master. And I think it's so important for players to stay in the game, educate the next generation, and letting them kids learn from players that have done it, that have worn that shirt and have won honours in not just for the club but in the game of football. Who was your heroes growing up, Dennis? Because we're going to start with your upbringing, your early days. But when Dennis Mortimer was a young kid kicking cans round Merseyside or Liverpool, that's where you were born, or
Yes.
stones or a tennis ball, who did you want to be? Because you were a big Liverpool fan, wasn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I tell the story in that first chapter,
Yeah.
about growing up in the shadow of the Beatles, and there's quite a few connections really, to that sort of period, the Beatles, and my dad, what he did sometimes as a part-time job. And I just wished I'd have spoken to my dad a little bit more before he passed away about, his life as a roadie,
Yeah.
looking after a band. But I never got around to that. So I had to get that information from one of my brothers. And the other thing as well, I mean, I did leave Liverpool at 15 and ended up in Coventry. And really, I've stayed in the Midlands ever since. But my other brothers, they were closer, obviously, to my dad as he grew up, and they grew older, and they started asking questions and everything, But my dad, he took us to Liverpool. He used to go and stand on the Kop. We used to go in the boys' pen. It was only a shilling, the old shilling in those days, 5p. I think my dad used to pay half a crown, to get into the Kop. But we had a great view. It was we didn't have any problems, in that area as well. Used to find quite a few of the kids wanted to climb over the fence into the Kop, and I kept on wondering, why do you want to go in there, for crying out loud? The place was just ram packed. I mean, the ground, the gates were closed at 2:00. Yeah. And those fans were in there. It was a full house in the standing areas and all that. It was a full house for an hour before the game, and you can imagine the crowd and everything, and the singing and the movement and everything that we've seen so often about the Kop. But that was where I started to sort of get to know my heroes, and which came to pass. And later on in my life, I played with a couple of them, or I got managed by one of them, and I played with one of those heroes, and it was it was an interesting time, and it was a time when Shankly took over. Yeah, Shankly it came down to Liverpool, and he took over a team, and he turned it into great. And he always reminds me, Ron Saunders always reminded me of Bill Shankly, and the way he went about his job. and his matter of factness. And so the heroes, my heroes really were probably Ian Callaghan and Peter Thompson in those days. Both wingers, playing in a 4-2-4 system as it was then. And those two guys, they got you out your seats with the runs they made and the chat, and the crosses they put in, and and it was just magic watching them play. Because Shankly had come in now and turned that team into something really special. And for 3 or 4 years, when I started watching them, probably about the age 12, and going to the match, for those 3 or 4 years, what I saw, watching them play was just some amazing memories, and I suppose the greatest memory would have been going up to Hampden Park to watch them play in the European Cup Winners' Cup final. I think it was against Eintracht Frankfurt. And they lost the game 2-1, and it wasn't a particularly great performance by Liverpool. But here's me now, a kid of 14 now who's taking a day off school, because the game was played on a Thursday. He's taking a day off school to get up to Hampden Park, travelling on the coach. No motorways in those days, everything's done on dual carriageways and everything. So imagine that journey, so we get up there probably just before the game started, and then we came straight after it. I got home at 6 o'clock that next morning. We got home, went into the house, had some breakfast, and went to school. I had one day off, so my mum had to give me a letter off because I wasn't feeling too well, which is a normal thing. So I think that was the only day I ever had off school. Yeah.
Just going a bit muffled, Dennis. You've gone away from me a little bit.
Sorry, mate. I think it's probably sometimes where I am in the house. Is it any better?
No. Any chance you're going back to where you was when we started?
Yeah, no.
Brilliant.
Well, no, I'm in the same.
Right.
But this always happens to me at this. I don't know. I get 10 minutes of good connection. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're loud and clear again. We can just put that little bit out.
Yeah, I get about 10 minutes of good connection, and then it just goes away. Yeah, it's living in the country, you see. Yeah, that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. Was your mother sporty? Because your dad's name was Joe, wasn't it? Joe Mortimer?
Yeah, Joseph.
Your mum's name was Mary, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I start the book off the first chapter. I started off with that. I think it's quite interesting. When I won't say what it says in the first chapter, but it's an interesting play on Joseph and Mary, really. Yeah, if you're a religious thing, But no, I mean, Mum wasn't sporty. Mum had to look after us. Listen, when you look back and you sort of think about, the times that we had, when everything was a struggle, for, growing up, your mother had to sort of make ends meet. Come Friday, she never had a penny in her purse, and we'd have to wait for my dad to come home, with his wage packet, give us some money to go round to the fish and chip shop and get some fish and chips. It was like that every week, and but listen, we had a fabulous time because there was no, there was no very few cars on the road, and when you lived in a little neighborhood where you could sort of play football in the street all the time because there was nothing going on, and those days were great, and you could be out on the street till 10 o'clock at night, and on your street, that is, there's plenty of lights. We're playing football still under the lights and everything, but we might be there till 10 o'clock, especially in the summer, or in early winter, but it was just a great environment, for young people like myself who had ambition, to sort of try to hone what they thought they had, and develop a skill, which at the time, you're thinking you'd love to play football as a profession, but it's a long way off. But from my point of view, when I joined Coventry at 15, I had no idea how quickly it would come for me to be playing in the first team.
How did that call from Coventry arrive, Dennis? What was the connection there?
Right. So there'd been two approaches from my services. Yeah, as to go. One had been from Bury. Yeah, and my teammate in KB Boys, Terry McDermott, he ended up at Bury. Yeah. And I've read, I got a copy of Terry's book which he wrote, about his career, and I couldn't believe it when he wrote about his Bury days. Yeah, and was I glad that I didn't end up at Bury, because it sounded horrendous, to be honest. Yeah, compared to Coventry. Because when I went to Coventry, it all came about from a scout called Alf Walton, and in the book there's a fabulous photograph of him just sitting by the riverside with an umbrella over his head. None of the cares of the world there. But this was a guy that came to the house and knocked on the door and spoke to my mum and dad, and we went from there really. But that's how it came about in those days. But I think the interesting thing about that was that. I think clubs, if they wanted to sign any young schoolboys, they had to approach the school first. So I first of all learnt about it from the headmaster, in the school. But I won't take you through what he said, but I'll leave that for you to read. But I think most people probably would know what a headmaster would say to a young lad who's only 14. About joining a football club. It wouldn't have been, oh no, that's a good career to go into, son. Yeah. I think your education might help you better, but that would be most headmasters around even today, I would imagine. Yeah, but listen, the Alf Walton, he gave me the opportunity, and I went to Coventry, but it's one of those things, Paul. I'd never been away from home before. Yeah, and here I am now, travelling to Coventry. Yeah, with no idea really what's going to happen. Yeah, all I know is that I'm going to get a chance now for the 6-week school holiday to do what I always love, and that's play football. Yeah. And basically that's all I would have been doing anyway, because it was a school holiday, you see. I was invited down during that 6-week period, and it was just heaven. What more could a lad ask for than to be playing football every day? Exactly what one wanted. But at 15, I had no idea, where this was going to lead to. I didn't dare dream where it would lead to, because you never know. But what I did think about was that, I've got a chance. Yeah, this is my opportunity, and so it went from there, really. And those first years as an apprentice, those 2 or 3 years learning the game, I had good people around me, who were good from the point of view of giving me the right advice, and keeping me on the straight and narrow. And I think being away from home was probably a big help as well, because I was never under the eye of, my brothers or my sister or my mum and dad or even people in the area who lived around you. There was no pressure.
SRB Media.
But that was, to me, what football was all about. And you just then got to find a team that where you're going to win it. But I didn't know I was going to win it with Aston Villa. Yeah, not at the time, but once I started playing and saw the quality of the players, that we had in 76, 77, I just felt to myself, crikey, this team could go a long, long way. We could be winning trophies every year. It didn't work out, it didn't work out after winning the League Cup in 77. But what happened then was there was a rebuild, as we all know, by Ron, and eventually he got the side that we've spoken about before that went on to win the league and the European Cup. But no, I just felt, winning a trophy at that age, even though we came second, but playing in a final, you just think to yourself, crikey, you'd like a bit more of this, and a lot more of it.
Absolutely. Let's stay in the Coventry early 70s at the moment. Your first game at Villa Park, I texted you the other day.
Yes,
And
yes.
I was looking through the England under-23s. You played 6 times for under-23s. You scored 2 goals against Holland, and you was compared to Bobby Charlton's Dennis Mortimer, the next Bobby Charlton. But let's talk about the first time that you played at Villa Park, because it was the 7th of March 1973 against Czechoslovakia, and Charlie George scored the only goal. What was it like playing there? Because when you were at Coventry, you'd gone to Villa Park. It's a bigger ground. Obviously, it's England. It isn't Aston Villa. But what did your first glimpses of that stadium feel like? And you could never have known that 9 years on, you would have been a European champion at that ground. It's quite incredible when you look at the story and the journey of a player.
Paul, I until you reminded me of it, in that little text you sent me, I had no idea. I mean, I probably could have looked, if I'd have looked at my programs and looked at where, where we played for the under-23s, I just totally forgot. I suppose I can't really be honest with you about what I thought of the ground, because I don't remember it. It's just one of those memories, it's a one-night affair, it's gone, what I mean, from that point of view. So I don't remember the night. It would have been a night game. So the impression, obviously, is the floodlights. I wouldn't have thought there'd be too many people in the ground. So from that point of view, I wouldn't have been expecting what did happen then when I did turn up. On Boxing Day in 1975, when I come out onto the field and there's 52,000 in there. So there's a different impression then. When you see a ground half empty, which it probably was, you don't get the impression of what it is. And it's quite interesting, because it's like when I went up to watch Liverpool play at Hampden Park. I've never seen such a poor ground in my life. I think it was like a non-league football ground, and it was only because there was 120,000 in there when England played against Scotland that you thought it was a great stadium. But obviously from Villa Park's point of view, it didn't make that impression, because you see, Coventry had a nice little ground, really. It was very compact, and it was, and I suppose from that point of view, it was probably more homely from that point of view by the fact that it looked full all the time. Where I don't know what kind of gates Aston Villa were getting at a time when I was playing at Coventry, but it certainly wasn't 52,000 every week.
No.
So the impression of the ground, the changing rooms, couldn't remember them. I can remember them now, where they are, where they were, but at the time, no. My memory of playing that day is very foggy, really. But as I said, the realization of it struck me when. I sort of made my debut on Boxing Day and realised, crikey, what a club what support they've got, but what a club this could be.
Absolutely. And for Coventry and for Villa, you made your debuts against West Ham. Were they a lucky team to play against, Dennis? And what was your luckiest and unluckiest grounds that you ever played in?
Unluckiest. I suppose the unluckiest, you'd have to look where you never won.
Is there a ground that you didn't win at?
I'd have to really look through the record books to see that one. I'm trying to think to myself that I think everywhere we went, I think I would have at least won at least once, but in my career, at that ground. We won at United, we won at Liverpool, the top teams. We won at Leeds, and QPR, we probably beat them. When they sort of went back to grass, not when they were playing on the AstroTurf pitch. I don't. It was quite interesting. I probably. I tell you what. Do you remember like Bristol City?
Yeah, Ashton Gate.
Teams like that. Yeah. I mean, we didn't play against them that often, but a game like that would probably be. I mean, they weren't in the first division that long, but probably we didn't get the results there that we thought we should have done. Yeah, against a team like that. But against the big boys, I think most of the time we played away. Those who are regulars in the first division. I can't really think of a team where a ground where I never won. And I felt, there's grounds where you felt when you walked out that this was the stadium. These are the stadiums you want to be playing in all the time. Obviously, Man United, Anfield, White Hart Lane was always another good one. See, Chelsea's was rubbish.
Yeah.
In the early days, and Alan probably told you that many times, but it was an awful ground really to play on, because you just seemed to be so far away from the from the fans, and it was with the track around it, and I suppose in those days, compared to what it became, it wasn't a particularly good ground to play on at Chelsea. Not at all. I'm trying to think of others that might have been just as bad. Derby County was. You wanted to play at Derby County away the first game of the season if you could. Yeah, because you wouldn't want to be any later than that. Yeah, when there was a bit of grass, and see West Ham was a tough one, but we did get some good results there as well. I got some good results with Coventry there also, but and now at the time, that in those early years, and we talk about this in the book, is about some of the players I played against. The great names, the Bobby Moores, the Jeff Hurst, the Bobby Charltons, George Best. I'm on the same pitch as these guys, the Mike Summerbys, the Franny Lees, and all that. The names are just, I look at the programs and I look at the team sheets and I think to myself, gosh, look at all those names there. Great names, great international names and all that. And the interesting thing as well is you could actually pronounce them all as well. Yes. It was Smiths or Joneses or Greaves or Best. It was a commentator. It was great for the commentator in those days. But nowadays, half the time I don't know how to say names half the time. Yeah, I just say, the number 10. If I was doing a summarizing on a radio show or something on a match, I'd be saying the number 10 or the number 9. Oh, you did well there. That a number 9. You'd be looking at the program and thinking, oh no, I can't read that name. Yeah, so no, it's but some of the names, it was I touch on them in the book as well. And in those early years, when I started getting in the first team, at the time I write about it. It's one of those things. You're out there on the pitch and you're thinking, well, I'm here for a reason. So don't be shy. Yeah. Don't go on a football pitch now and feel as if you're with all these superstars and all that. Don't just go out there thinking now that you're making the numbers up. Try and make something happen. Where people will take notice of you. And I did. I mean, in those early years, before I got moved to Aston Villa. There was talk of movement for previous 2 seasons, but it never got back to me. I only read it in the paper. It was like I never got called into the office by the managers because in those days they do, before, because this was before Jimmy Hill came back. You see, yeah, Jimmy came back and wanted the club to be in the black and not in the red. Yeah, so he just thought, well, there was an opportunity. To sell one of the up-and-coming stars that's in the team who could actually take Coventry, forward and maybe win things with them. But Jimmy just felt the security of the club was more important, and he also saw the fact that there was lots of good young players coming through at Coventry City. So he took a chance, and if you remember it, they came up to the first division in 1967, yeah, and they stayed in that league all the way through until the Premier League, and that was a long tenure, for a club like that to have stayed in the first division and then start in the Premier League. That was some tenure they had, which was I suppose in a way, Jimmy Hill decided what needed to be done, and what he did now maybe gave Coventry City that platform, Paul, to stay where they were, gave the club a bit of money, kept them in the black, and and they managed then to bring some really good footballers through.
Absolutely. You referenced some of the funny sounding names that you wouldn't be able to pronounce in the modern game. And Paul Fletcher, when I'd done a Legends podcast with the Burnley centre forward, Paul Fletcher, he said, whatever club you go to, there'd be an Englishman, an Irishman, a Scotsman and a Welshman.
Yes.
You'd have the same characters. You'd have the dresser, you'd have the comedian, you'd have the ladies' man.
SRB Media. And you can listen to an extended version of this podcast at www.patreon.com/SRB Media. SRB